Cool. 'Cause I send this to people who cannot be here live. They all want to hear it, partake. So yeah, no, we're super psyched for today. In today's cohort, it's a bit of a I wouldn't say continuation, but it is kind of building on our last cohort. So if you weren't able to join that last cohort in which I was really, really sick, sicker than I even thought I was, come to find out I had strep throat for about a week and a half, and I just thought I had a head cold, and ended up being on two different types of antibiotics. So anyway, totally underplayed that cold. But I was losing my voice, but I still powered through it. And we were just talking about managing your career in that last one. And so today will be a continuation of kind of that conversation, but from a slightly different take, which is, how do you kind of show up? How do you show your organization as a designer, and kind of a doer? How do you kind of make the leap to the next level? How do you show your boss? How do you show your org stakeholders that you're ready for more, and that you're ready to take on the next level role? And as we know, that always happens first by you have to show you're ready. You have to do some of those skills and those tasks before you are seen as ready, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So let me share my screen and get started. For those of you who have never met me, which I don't think are many today, most of you have I've interfaced with, but I'm Gabi Gonzalez. I'm the founder of the Design Cohort. And I'm also a career coach. The cohort came first, honestly. It was a bit of a passion project. I decided that we had all been siloed for way too long, that we needed a better way to connect with each other and also elevate the industry, the design industry specifically. And with my kind of very traditional creative background, getting into design leadership, I have worked with, trained, and continued to help people all around the organization figure out how do you make that kind of leap into design leadership, and on a daily basis, how do you show design leadership skills? Even if you're a designer, there are certain skills, certain ways you present. How do you talk about your work? So we talk about a lot of these things here. We also talk about the challenges of, the actual industry, finding a job. So this is a support network, and it's not a one person show. You guys bring as much to the table as I do. So we have different types of meetings. Sometimes we meet, we do more lecture series like today will be. But, by all means, please take part in the comments, comment away. If you have a build, if you have something to say, please do so in the comments. We will open up later to Q&A. So today's forum is more of that kind of framework, but we do others where we do round tables, so you guys get to know each other, where we do breakout rooms. So not every cohort is the same. So we try to mix it up. Of late, they've been a little bit more lecture just because that's the forum, that people have been kind of needing. But I do think we'll be doing a round robin where you get to meet each other probably in our next cohort, because we haven't done that one since I think February. And a lot of people enjoyed that. So they get to see each other and get to meet other people. You guys who know me, know us, know my partner in crime, Jeremy. Full disclosure, he is my husband, but he's also my operational manager. So he is here for support, and he runs the chat while I blab away. So that's just a little bit about us. So yeah, hopefully, you guys have seen me, heard me, but if you haven't, that's the gist of who I am and who we are. So yeah, happy to see some familiar faces today and some new ones on the call. So we're gonna get into it. So what we're talking about today, as I already alluded to, is the next level design leadership, elevating your career and career guidance. I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, right? It's like we go to design school, we are taught the craft, we master the craft. We feel pretty good about that, by the time we graduate college, or get any sort of education in this space. Maybe you went a less traditional route, which is totally fine, legit, respect, because you doing it that way is probably harder, honestly. But at some point, if you don't have a great boss, if you don't have a good mentor, if you're not part of an organization that cares about you and people and growing people, which let's admit right now is becoming more hard to find those type of organizations. You kind of have to figure this out on your own, and that can be really, really hard. I will say, my early on experience, I was very fortunate in growing my career. I had some great bosses. I had people that took me under their wing. I shadowed a lot and I learned from, some really stellar people around me when I was working at Procter and Gamble. But as I got kind of further and further in my career, that got harder to find. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. And that is why we're talking about this today, because you may hear things you've heard before, or you may hear things that you're like, wow, I never even thought about it that way. So hopefully you gain some insight into how to level up, how to show up, and how to continue to grow as a designer and a design leader. Cool. So, what moves you forward in your career? What signals that you are ready for the next level? There's really two things as leaders, period, if you're in design or not, that leaders talk about when it comes to growing your career. The very first one is exposure to new skills. Exposure, that word gets thrown around a lot, and people get confused on what it really means. But what leaders mean when they say exposure is that you've had an opportunity to be in the room, that you've had an opportunity to observe how things get done. Maybe you weren't leading necessarily because you don't start out leading, you first have to learn the skill, right? So, exposure is you're being exposed to a new skill set. Let's say, for example, you're working on a project and all of a sudden they're like, hey, we need to do some research. Obviously, you're not going to run the research, but you're going to be part of that team that's running the research. And so you start being exposed to how to conduct research. That's what we mean by exposure, right? So you start finding these opportunities to have new experiences. Sometimes they come organically, sometimes you have to go out and seek them out, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And sometimes they're given to you. If you have a really great boss, they might be like, hey, we want you to grow in this area. You should be part of, this exposure opportunity. So that's what people call exposure. And that's a really important term. Again, gets thrown around, but not a lot of people actually talk about what that can look like. And that's something, again, we do in the cohort. We try to talk about like real talk. Let's talk about what that looks like. So I'm sure we've all heard the proverbial, you have to have a seat at the table, right? Leaders throw that around a lot. Well, design should have a seat at the table. To be successful in design, you need to gain that seat at the table. That's great, but no one ever really talks about how. And so that's the stuff we do at the cohort. We talk about what does that look like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, yeah, and you guys, I'm kind of looking at the chat too as I go. So please, add here if you have thoughts on any of this. And then the other piece that a lot of designers tend to miss is the visibility component. Because we tend to be the ones maybe behind a screen that are creating the actual artifacts that are going, out into the world. Or we think, well, if we just are really good at our craft, people will notice. Like they'll see my great design, they'll notice I'm good at design, they'll notice how great I am at what I do. And that is, I hate to tell you, is not the case, right? So it may get you to a senior designer position, but beyond that, that's where you have to start showing other skills. You have to start communicating. You have to sell yourself. You have to put yourself out there. So visibility is upper management and the people that make the decisions for promotions actually seeing what you do and seeing the value that you bring. And this is where frustration tends to live for many designers because they're like, oh, I'm doing all the work. I'm putting in the hours. I'm working overtime. I'm doing all the right stuff, but I'm somehow still not being promoted or I'm not being seen as the hard worker, right? So, yes, big emphasis on the value. However, value is great, but again, if your value is not seen and it's not promoted, then you will not continue to progress in your career. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And it's not just do people, it's the right people see you, right? Because you have to be able to be seen by the people who make the promotion decisions. And that's another area that, we can coach, that we can guide. It's different for every organization. So you kind of got to unpack that and break that down situationally. But if the right people who are having those conversations of who is right for promotions, who's right for the next role, the people that you need to influence others aren't seeing you, then that's where you may be missing an opportunity. So visibility is key. And designers tend to be introverts, so this can be hard. I'm not saying all designers are introverts, but there are studies out there that say about 60-70% of designers are introverted. So again, self-promotion can be hard, right? And there are ways to do that even if you're not the person that's going to be on stage. So, we can talk a little bit about that. We could probably do a whole cohort just on visibility. So, so that those are the two factors though that if you're like, why am I not getting promoted? Keep these two words in mind. They're the two factors that I would tell anybody: exposure, visibility. All right. This is not Gabby making this up. This is stuff that has been taught to me, preached to me. This comes from corporate kind of lectures and training that I've done. So just know it's legit. It's not just Gabby BS. Okay. So,
The
all
rest of
right.
it,
What was that?
I said like the rest of it. I'm just kidding.
Ah, ha, ha,
Like,
ha. Hey, I'm just passing on the information. All right. So, if there was anything you take away from today, it would be that if you're kind of sitting around, this is where people get stuck, right? If you're sitting around and you're like waiting to be given the promotion, stop doing that. You have to take action, right? Because the promotion is not going to just be handed out. I know you're kind of saying, Gabby, yeah, we know that, but you'll be surprised how many people know that, but they're not necessarily taking action when I coach and guide them to start unpacking what they are and aren't doing. Okay. So it seems like a no-duh, seems like common sense, but for many, it actually is not. Um, so yeah, the biggest thing that you can do is to start doing these three things. Okay. So one is communicating your value. So we're going to unpack that. Learn how decisions are made in your organization. We're going to unpack that. And I have some great kind of ways to do this. And take action towards your goals. So we're going to unpack all this now. Awesome. Just moving windows around, guys. Yes. Okay. So communicating your value, I actually love this example. And, we were recently actually watching the Michael Jordan documentary. And one of the things that really stood out to me about him is that we all see him as the GOAT, right? We're like, we know he's the best of all time. Hope no one's going to argue that, to be honest. So, but one of the things is it's easy to look at somebody who's really, really great at what they do and has been successful, and they made it look easy, but in fact, it really wasn't. Michael Jordan's first year on the Bulls were awful. They were terrible. This was 1984. He had just come out of UNC. Yeah, he was good there, but you every time you kind of change or shift orgs or teams, you have to reprove yourself. And so he came on this team. He was skinny. He was quote unquote tiny, for the team. And he was someone that wasn't like partaking in the partying and all the other things that, the teammates were doing. So he was kind of straight and narrow. And instead of coming in and saying, guys, I'm really great, I'm awesome, he knew he had to prove himself. And so what did he do? He showed up every day. He became a leader of the team. He led by doing. And once people saw what he could do, then they were like, man, yeah, he's going to bring this team together. But he didn't start there. And that's the thing that, we all have to remember is that no one starts by being great. Everyone has to build themselves out. And that is a huge part of getting to the next level, right? You have to earn your stripes. So you're not just going to be handed the next level. You really do have to prove yourself for the next level. And a few ways that you can really start communicating your value is speaking up. Many designers will kind of come in the room. We're listeners. We're great active listeners. We're, empathic, and that can be great for the work. But if we never talk, if we never show up, if we never voice an opinion, voice a point of view, say, hey, design can help solve that. Hey, here's how design can do that. If we're always kind of sitting in the back of the room, you won't be visible. And so that comes down to that visibility component that we were talking about. So I do urge anyone who's trying to get to the next level and really finding themselves not being seen or being heard is that's probably a sign that you're not speaking up enough and you're not speaking up enough in the right forums. Okay, so that's just, one component of communicating your value. Um, the other component is be willing to step up under pressure. It's amazing how many people, when there's a hard project or something that seems really complex, shy away from that. The true leaders step up to that. They fill the gaps. So, this is a great way to start showing that you have leadership skills. I was just coaching a client this past week, and he was talking about he was on a project. It was a mess. It was super unorganized. No one knew up from down, and they had 6 weeks to deliver. And he's like, I stepped in and I said, hey guys, here's what we need to do. Broke down the phases, from week 1 to week 6. And no one asked him to do that. It was an opportunity that he saw to fill a gap. And sometimes we do this naturally just because we're fed up. No one's taking charge, no one's organizing, and we're like, okay, we need to organize. But those are the true natural leaders. Those are the people that are like, you know what, this isn't going well. Despite the fact that I haven't been asked to make it go well, I am going to do something about it. Whereas a lot of people tend to shy away from those opportunities. So that's always an opportunity, time under pressure, to step in, step up, and help out and show that you have leadership skills. And then the other component that we talk about is using the term I. This may be very, very hard for most designers, especially if you've worked in the agency world or if you have worked in a larger in-house team, because I've heard this from many people. They're actually told not to use I. They're told to use we. We're a team. We do everything together, which can be great and it should be a team sport, but not good for promotion. Because then what happens is we did everything together as a team, and I have no idea what you did as an individual. And so when it does come time to, say, hey, Amy did a really great job on this project. Guess what? We may not know who Amy is because she doesn't self-promote. She hasn't talked about what she has done lately. So you can use I, and I don't say I. Everyone hates that person that takes credit for everything, but you can take credit for the things that you did. You said, I did this part with the team. The team and I did this, and I specifically had this idea. Okay, so it doesn't mean like you're going to take credit for everyone's work, but by all means, take credit for what you brought to the table. Maybe you're the one that had that really great idea or concept. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I added value by saying XYZ. I added value by bringing this to the table. Okay. And the fifth one, this is one that I've really took on probably too late in life. Not that I'm not a likable person, I generally am, but I think as you get older, you get more stuck in your ways. You're trying, your hardest to make things kind of get through the system, get through the org, but just be likable. And I've actually been reading a book lately that I keep going back to is The Science of Likability by Patrick King. If you haven't checked it out, please do. I think for designers, there's some very simple ways to be likable that are just, he's a psychologist, so this is all based in human psychology that can just make you more likable in a very small amount of time. I'll give you one of my favorites that, I just was like, wow, that's so simple. Mirroring someone's gestures. So I see somebody, I think it's, hopefully I say your name right, Kika. You just mirror maybe what they're doing. and mirror, what you see on the screen. Apparently, that's an easy way to make you likable to the person you're talking to. So, little tips like that. He has bigger tips, more in-depth tips, but that was one that really, caught my attention. So, let's say you're interviewing, right? Just slightly mirror the person. It doesn't have to be exact, but if they have their hand on their face, put your hand on your face. Um, it's a weird psychology thing. It makes you more approachable, makes them like you. Very interesting book. So, but being likable is a craft like any other. And there are actually tips and tricks to, making people like you better. So that can make your life easier. Awesome. So then the second kind of component here of growing your career, this is a really big one that I don't think a lot of people talk about. I personally was taught this at P&G because one of the things that P&G does really well is help you understand how the company functions and works. So, learning how decisions are made is a critical part of getting to the next level. Um, this is all about looking beyond just your role. It's about looking beyond your team. It's about looking beyond design because design plays a part in a bigger ecosystem. So you have to understand the ecosystem that you live in. And this is something that I think we're, again, aren't taught in design school, which we totally should be taught. But at the end of the day, design is part of a business world, and business is about selling. So if you can't connect design to selling something, you're not connecting design to being a business builder. And that can be an area that a lot of people get stuck. Why do you get stuck? Because you come in and you may be talking about design this, design that, design this, and people are not connecting the dots to why design matters. So I think a lot of times, we're kind of stuck in our little silos and we don't understand how we affect the bigger picture. I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg for this example because at the time in which she was studying to be a lawyer, a lot of her, female counterparts and friends were out protesting. They were out talking about uh, feminine rights and female rights and the right to vote. And she wasn't kind of a loud person in this. She went a different route. She wanted to affect systemic change. And the way that she went about doing that is she decided to become a lawyer. And she wanted to have that seat at the table. And that was her goal. And so she reached that goal. But she reached it by learning how true change happened and going to the heart of making that change. She was a quiet leader. She wasn't necessarily the one that was going to be screaming from the rooftops, but she probably affected, I wouldn't say probably, she affected more change than probably anyone else that was out there protesting. So, again, there are many ways to lead. And she's just an example of a maybe different way to lead than we typically think of a leader, right? So just keep that in mind. So things like from presenting to persuading. Sometimes when we're presenting, as I am today, many people are like, everyone's going to see my point of view. I'm just going to lecture and they'll just get it, right? Or you're presenting design. You're like, they'll get it because I'm just presenting it. And that's what happens when you present. Well, that's not necessarily true. Just because you're presenting does not mean that people are going to see your point of view. You want to be presenting in a way that you're thinking about your audience, where they're coming at, and what are their pain points that you can help solve. And that's where persuasion comes in because you're meeting them where they're at. And a lot of times designers don't do that. When you start doing that, you're going to feel a lot less tension in this idea of I'm presenting and no one's kind of picking up what I'm putting down. So that is one way we start affecting change in how decisions are made is really understanding those persuasion tactics. The other way is identifying who holds the power. A lot of times we have many people in a room that we're talking to, but we're not targeting the decision maker. And so we have 15 people in a room that we're presenting design to, and we think we need to convince all 15 people. Typically, that is not the case. Every time I present work, I always ask who's the decision maker in the room because typically there's one, maybe two. Okay, people that really, really are going to make the decision. And then I think about what matters to them. And so understanding who holds the power is extremely important because not everyone holds the power. They think they do, they'll tell you they do, they'll act like they do, but you really do need to identify who's going to make that final decision. So, again, these are just tactics for understanding how decisions are made in orgs. Understanding the business need. We all talk this and what's motivating the business, but we don't really tell people how to do this, right? Especially designers. So understanding the business needs really comes from connecting to business partners, asking them, what is kind of the biggest problem they're trying to solve right now. I'll give you a great example. I was working on Huggies diapers, and we were having a pricing war with Pampers across Amazon. And one of the things, as I was listening in the room, that the leaders were talking about was that we were having this pricing war, but we weren't necessarily looking any more premium than Pampers. We weren't talking our claims on our Amazon page. Our Amazon page honestly looked terrible. Well, I raised my hand. I said, "Hey, I know we're having these pricing wars, but we also don't look premium." And everyone stopped and was like, "Can you fix that?" I said, "Absolutely, we can fix that." Easy fix for design, easy win attached to a business need. So that's when design starts making sense to people. We're no longer just pretty pictures, we're a solution to growing your business. So that's just a little anecdote on what that looks like. Okay. If you don't know your business needs, if you don't know your business objectives, if you don't know what's motivating the business, find someone you can talk to in the business and ask them. Ask them what your biggest problem is. Maybe it's the person you're working directly with. Also, don't be scared to walk by and talk to your president. They actually like it when people from the business talk to them. Contrary to what we probably believe, they don't want to be bothered. They actually enjoy talking to their orgs. Yeah, so don't be afraid to ask the question. Maybe it's not in a big forum in a big room, but pull someone aside and say, "Hey, can you help me understand this?" Or, "I'm not really sure I understand, what we're trying to solve. Can you help me understand it better?" Okay, so don't be afraid to ask. That's that speaking up component. And then speaking in their language. Oftentimes designers were talking, "Oh, look at this composition, look at this hierarchy, look at this contrast." And that is just like way over their heads. They don't care about that. They want to know, is this going to pop at shelf? Is the consumer going to see this? What are they going to see first? Does this feel, modern? Does it feel relevant? Is it relevant to, a younger generation? And then you tell them why. Okay, so many times we start over explaining from a design perspective, and we're again not starting from their perspective. Learn their language, learn ROI, learn volume, learn velocity, learn what these terms mean so that you can connect it and say, this is how design is going to help drive velocity. This is how design is going to help drive sales. Because when you do that, you'll be respected as a partner. And you're no longer just a design person that shows up and shows what they consider pretty pictures. And then learn to influence, not win. Many people that I work with, many designers that I see are looking to have the concept that they want to be chosen be the one that's chosen. So they're looking to be right. They're looking to win. They're not looking to influence. And there's a big distinction in that. When you're looking to influence decisions, then you're starting to understand what do people need and how do I influence them to make a better choice, even in how you're presenting. Hey, I'm going to present to you two ideas. One is going to solve your problem this way, one is going to solve your problem that way. Both solve your problem. Then we need to decide strategically which one is right for the business. Is very different than coming in and saying, "I'm going to present two designs today, and one's going to be blue and one's going to be red, and that's what we're going to talk about." So you're not, I'm being overly crude with my simplified examples. But when you do that, they again aren't understanding why you're presenting two different ideas, why they look so different, and they're not even understanding how to make a choice. So if somebody's not understanding how to make a choice, what they're going to do is default to their own opinions and they're going to just critique. Well, I hate blue, so let's just go with the red one. Even if you thought blue was the right choice because maybe it stood out from competition, maybe it made them stand out better, in a shelf set. But because that wasn't articulated, they're going to make a choice based on their own bias. They're going to make a choice on the information that they have. And sometimes, they may just flip a coin. Who knows? But you want to avoid that who knows scenario. And that's what influencing really looks like, is thinking about what's important to them and having those right conversations, and serving the work up the right way. Awesome. All right, so everyone knows Steve Jobs. We all know that he had a real passion, knack, and like design sense. I don't know if a lot of people know this, that Steve Jobs never finished college, but he did stay on for quite some time, and he took a lot of design classes, which is why he had such a great design sensibility. He actually even took some graphic design classes when he kind of deferred his graduation, or deferred his major, and kind of kept studying. So I think, in some ways, that was a really good reason why he did what he did going into the future and was so influential in design, even though he wasn't, technically a designer. And I think one of the things that we can learn from him, like him or not, I know who can be a polarizing personality, is that he didn't wait to feel completely ready to go off and start his own company. What I mean by that is he wasn't like, hey, I have to finish college before I can do this next thing. He actually saw it as a waste of time, right? Because he was like, this isn't teaching me anything that I don't know. This isn't teaching me anything that I can't do now. So he wasn't necessarily just waiting for the opportunity to come. He went and was seeking out the opportunity. He was making the opportunity happen. So, trying something new, speaking up in a meeting, volunteering for a project that teaches you far more than just, thinking about the doing, or thinking about, where you should be. The biggest thing that I coach people on is take action. Because where we get stuck is when we're ruminating, when we're thinking about how things should be versus how things are. But if you can't define an action that you can take that moves you forward and moves you into the direction that you want to go in, then you're going to stay stuck. So, how do we do this? Ask for a high profile project. Don't wait to be given it. Ask your boss, ask your boss's boss, ask the owner of your agency. Make sure that you are asking for the opportunities. Find a good mentor or coach. Okay, I will tell you there's a difference in between a mentor and a coach. Watch my master class. I'll send it to all of you via email after this, but there is a difference. But find people that you can learn from. Okay, if you don't have that given to you organically in your organization, seek it out, because you have to learn somewhere. And we learn by observing, we learn by seeing how others do things, we learn by shadowing, we learn by talking. We don't just learn by training. Training gives us the principles, but we don't master those principles until we actually apply them. So you want to take in learning, and then you want to find those opportunities to apply them. Get clear on your own vision. One of the things we all know about Steve Jobs is he was a visionary. When you're clear on a vision, other people are clear on your vision, and they can get behind you. And that's what creates leaders. People who have a clear vision, can articulate it, can get other people excited about it. If you're not clear on your vision and where you want to go or where you want to take something, no one else will be. Okay. And that starts with you. Again, something you can get coached on, but get clarity on that vision. Take on something bigger or something new that you've never done before. It can be small, it doesn't have to be huge. Maybe it's something, maybe you're designing packaging for, a one off kind of project. Take on a bigger project, take on a bigger packaging project. Instead of just designing that one pack, maybe design the entire lineup. If you're kind of designing parts of, a UX, UI kind of project, maybe take something on that's bigger than that. Ask to be like someone's second-hand person, on something. That support role can teach you a lot, so that once you support someone else doing something, the next time you may be able to lead it because you're like, oh, that's how that's done. Learned a lot from supporting someone. And then this one's really important. This is something we talk a lot about in corporate, but map out your goals, actions, and desired results. So you can have an idea. I want to do X. If you never write it down, if you never make it a goal, if you don't write down how to get to X, if you don't write down, the actions you're going to take to reach that goal, and you don't clearly define your results and what that looks like at the end, what does success look like, it is proven that you will be less likely to reach your goals. People who map out their goals, how they're going to get there, what success looks like by when, are 75% or more likely to actually reach their goals. This has been proven. Writing them down, being clear on how you're going to get there, being clear on when you're going to get there, and having that plan is what makes most successful people successful. Okay, so it's not just I have an idea, I'm going to launch a new computer company. It's probably a whole plan that's been put down on paper that we never saw, right? So those are just some things on taking action and how you can take action today. Awesome. I had this whole other bit. We don't have time for it. I'll do it another time. But I will introduce you. Some people who are getting coaching from me will recognize this. I was going to do it live here today, but what I would say is take this as homework. If you aren't clear on what you want, start with what you don't want. Every single person knows what they don't want. It's so amazing how easy it is to say, I don't like this, I don't like this, critique, I hate it, I don't want this anymore. That visceral feeling is so innately strong. Like you will do that part will be easy. And then from what you don't want, reflect on that and start making a list of the things you do want. This alone will give you some clarity. So if you take anything away as an action from today, make your don't want, and do want list. All right. I was going to do this as a team, but it's just not going to happen. So I do coach. I do offer complimentary discovery call, having issues, might need coaching. I've even talked to people who are like, hey, I just have a question. This is what the community's for. But I do offer one-to-one coaching for people who are looking for more in-depth situational help, people who want to grow in their leadership skills. And if you want to, you're like, this is all great, but I have no idea how to apply it. That's what coaching is for. All right. So Jeremy, off to you. He's going to put me in the hot seat and I'm going to do some Q&As. If you have a question that you didn't submit, please put it in the chat and we will try to get to it. And so, yeah, we're going to do the more interactive part of this. Take it away.
All right. Sounds good. Sorry, having some computer challenges over here. Yeah, so I've got a list of questions here that were submitted to Gabi. I'm just going to ask you these in some random order. So no pre-planned behind the scenes stuff here. So I'll just start right away. So one of them says, I think it's great way to start. Question is, there's so many new requirements for design leaders today. How do you know which to concentrate on?
That is a very, very good question. Especially as there's the pile on of all the different skill sets, it's always fun to look at the new job postings because it's you got to do this, you got to do that, and you have to be a master of AI. We want you to be, a doer, and we want you to be a leader. So I totally understand where this question is coming from. What I would say, though, is there are many different types of leaders. So one of the things that we tend to do everywhere, but especially in design, is we tend to use generic terms. Designer. Okay, well, there's 100 different types of designers, right? And then we tend to say, I'm a design leader. Okay, but what kind of design leader? So there are several different design leaders. The two that I'm going to use as examples for this question is, for example, you have a creative director, and then you might have a design director. These tend to have two different skill sets. A creative director tends to stay closer to the creative team, They're inspiring that team. They're, showing the team how to maybe come up with creative solutions. They're ensuring that their team is meeting objectives of the business, of the client. That is a creative director's job. A design director is typically looking beyond design. They're looking at the ecosystem of design. They're meeting with stakeholders. They're doing the negotiations, the influencing, and then they're bringing that back to their team and saying, okay, guys, this is what we need to do. They're looking at org structures. They're looking at resource management. So they're looking at things beyond design. Two very different kind of leaders. One staying very close to the creative work, one staying close to their creative team. One is going beyond and orchestrating beyond just design and making design successful in their bigger organization and ecosystem. So get clear on which kind of leader you're looking to be. Because to say I want to be a design leader is kind of a generic approach. Once you do that, look at the skill sets like we just went through and think through which skill sets do you need to major in and focus there. Okay. If you're like chasing some sort of design leadership description that is everything in the kitchen sink, run because it's wrong. You cannot do it all. Okay. If you're looking at a job posting that is everything in the kitchen sink, a Jack and Jill of all trades, I would say run because that organization does not understand doesn't have a design maturity that you would want to work in because you're going to get caught wearing a lot of hats, as many say. And all that is a recipe for your own burnout and your own disaster. So yeah, if you're working in an org and that term's being thrown around and it's not clear what your role is and what you should be delivering, that's a sign that it's not a design mature org and they don't know what they're doing. So that's kind of my answer to that one.
So when it says we're a family here and everyone wears a lot of hats, those are probably two red flags to run away screaming because that means nobody knows who's in charge of what, right?
Pretty much, yeah. This tends to happen in a lot of startups where like they have lean orgs, or small agencies where they don't have the headcount or they don't want to spend the money on the profit they're making on people and resources. We do see this in corporate, but I think sometimes corporate's a little easier to step back because there's always like other people that will do it. Or if the work doesn't get done a lot of times in corporate, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Somebody may not notice because there's so much going on. But what I would say is, if somebody's not giving you this direction, if you don't have a great boss, a great mentor, or a coach,
Mhm.
then you have to do it yourself. Everyone has to take a step back. It's so much harder once you start doing everything to say, I'm not going to do it anymore. So starting a new job is always a great place to reset this and make sure that you're not being, the wear the all hats person. Once you put on that hat, it's really hard to take it out of your closet, if you know what I mean. People then go, oh, you can do that? Awesome. Do more of that. And then you do it again. Do more of that again, or do more of the next thing. Once you tell people you do stuff, they're going to come to you to do stuff. So be careful of the things that you volunteer to do. If you're wanting to be more of a leader, don't be volunteering to do all the executional stuff because you start doing that executional stuff, people are going to come to you for the I need this and I need it now. So that's another thing is like where are you spending your time? You cannot equally 100% spend your time in leadership and execution. There's not enough time to go around. I like to do an 80-20 split. So if I am hands-on, I'm hands-on only when necessary. That's my personal like North Star for how I balance when I do need to be a doer with being a leader.
Nice. So you're setting your own boundaries. It sounds like just
I
make
am
sure.
very good at setting my own boundaries. I'm not going to lie. It's a
I'll I'll,
knack
I'll
that, I don't know
reinforce
where I
that.
got it, but I got it. And I think it was just out of necessity. So Jeremy can vouch for that. He's probably heard me talk a lot about it when I come home from work. So
Just a few times. Uh, all right, I'm going to move this on to the next one. I'm going to take it to a completely different place. I like this short and sweet question, which says, how do I stand out in a sea of thousands of job applicants?
Yes, I get this
Oof.
question all the time. All right, so thousands of job applications. First of all, I like to remind people there may be thousands or a thousand or whatever the number is of job applicants. How many of those are actually people that could actually do the job? Not a whole lot. If anyone's ever hired, okay, you know this. Like, a recruiter brings you, or an HR recruiter or whatever brings you a bunch of resumes, and you're like, what is this? Half of these people don't even like meet the criteria I gave you. So don't like be worried about on LinkedIn, it says, over 100 people applied. Yeah, probably. But did their resume match the criteria? Did they, get through the ATS screener? Probably not. So don't shy away from that. And then I would say the other piece, and this is something that I coach a lot in my coaching program, is you have to write a resume that works for that job post. You have to mirror the right keywords and signal the right things. Once you're a match for that job post in the ATS system, your resume will go through. Okay. Most resumes don't make it through. I think it's only like 10% of them actually make it through. So that's your best kind of in the door approach. And I rather someone take the time to get a really stellar resume that matches a job posting that will get through than to be applying for thousands of jobs. That's my short answer.
Nice. Nice. Really good. All right, let's see here. We'll go to a different place. Interesting. I like this one. How do you get your work in front of senior leaders when your manager does not advocate for you?
Ah, yeah, the bad manager questions are the hardest because unfortunately, a bad manager is your gatekeeper. Okay. Your boss holds the keys to your success. Okay. Many, many times. It's hard to bypass them. There are some orgs where you can bypass them. It also depends how strong this individual is and how manipulative they are. I have bypassed managers who weren't necessarily supporting me, but I did it in a way that looked like made them look good. So that's one thing is like always try to make your manager look good. If you ever make your manager look bad, that's where the tension's going to start. Okay. So is what you're doing helping your manager look good? If you want to have a good relationship with them, that is something to always keep in mind. If you're fighting, challenging your manager, that's not a good place to be. Okay. You don't want to be the one going, well, I think we should do this instead. I'm not saying don't voice your opinion, but I am saying ask yourself, is it worth the battle with your manager? Because again, they hold the keys to your success. If your manager isn't showing your work, it's kind of their role to decide what gets shown. All right. If they're the ones that are deciding this goes to the client or this is what goes out the door, it's their role. You have to accept that. There's not much you can do about that. Beyond that, learn how to influence instead of learn how to challenge and learning how to fight. Fighting is not going to get you anywhere. The art of influence is what's going to get you somewhere. Is there
Mhm.
something that matters to your manager that you can say, hey, I think this will help you solve this, or I had this brilliant idea for you that I think based on what you said. Anytime you say what you said, somebody's going to go, oh, I said that? Oh, even if they didn't say it, they will be like, oh, I did say that. I probably did say that, even though I don't remember. It's amazing when you give credit to people that they will be more accepting of your idea. So these are the things in the science of likability that I really like is that there are little tips and tricks that you can do to be more likable.
Wow.
So, think about that when you're talking, working with your manager. If they're just a difficult person, there's not a whole lot you can do. You got to get somewhere else, get a new manager, move to a different part of the org, move to a different team. The other thing I'll say is if you are not happy with the decisions they're making, that's not really your choice. That's their choice. And so if you're finding yourself in a place that you're wanting to be the leader and you're wanting to do what your boss does and be the one making the choices, that's a sign you might want to be a leader. That was a sign for me. I didn't necessarily like always being told what to do, and I didn't always agree with what I was being told what to do. So guess what? I said, I'm going to become a leader so I have more power
Mhm.
and I'm more empowered to make those choices. Okay. So
Yep.
those are just a few things to think about. Not an easy question to answer in the hot seat, but a
Sure.
difficult boss is probably one of the hardest things you're going to face.
Yeah, that's tough. I'm going to ask you, okay, shifting gears, and this ties into a question in the chat as well. So I know Kika, if I'm saying your name right, asked a question, and it's similar to what's written here. So I'm going to kind of weave them two together, which is, how can I sort of change the perception of value that I'm providing in my role? So, I'm seen as more of a doer, but I want to be, seen more strategic, and how can I maybe set some healthier boundaries to get there?
Okay. Boundary setting and trying to get to the next level are two hard things to do at the same time. Because when you're trying to get to the next level, you're actually having to work harder. So you may feel burnt out for a small stint of time. When you're trying to learn a new skill, as we all know, it takes more time. It's just part of the game. So if you're already at a place of burnout, probably not the best time to start trying to do harder things. We have to manage the burnout first,
Mhm.
set the boundaries, make some decisions on the type of work that you're going to be focusing on, and set those boundaries, rescope yourself so that you have capacity to then level up and do the harder things. So I would not put those two things together. Now,
Okay.
if you're trying to level up, show your value, again, that's so much extra work you're going to have to put in because you're going to have to be doing new things instead of just doing the work, delivering the work, giving it to someone. You're going to have to start doing the two things we talked about, which is finding exposure opportunities and being more visible. Those two things, surprisingly easy to say, surprisingly hard to do because they require a lot of energy. They require you thinking, where am I going to insert myself? How can I insert myself? Who can I influence to allow me to insert myself? Who's going to kind of give me the invitation to be in the room? We always talk about getting a seat at a table. We never talk about getting an invitation to the room. Getting an
Mhm.
invitation to being in the room is the first part to being having a seat at a table. You don't go from not being in the room to sitting at the table because you don't have the exposure yet to how to sit at the table. When you get an invite into the room, you start observing how things work. Observation is the first way we learn. That's how we learn as babies. That's how we learn as children. That's how we learn as adults. So you want to get an invitation into the room. When you're in the room, you don't talk, you don't say anything, you observe. You're learning.
Mhm.
How do things get done? What is my boss saying if you have a boss in that situation? What are other people saying? What are they talking about? What's important to them? It's all observational learning. That is your first step to
Mhm.
learning where the value lies. Okay, so you have to add value, you have to understand where the value comes from. What is important to your organization?
Wow.
Until you understand that, how are you adding value? Adding value where? Because you don't know what they're valuing. So
Mhm.
define what they're
That's great.
valuing, get some observational kind of exposure, and then once you do that, you can start speaking up. Okay.
Mhm.
Hey, I had this idea. Start in small forums, start in safe spaces. Test yourself out. Give yourself time to learn. Okay. You don't want to go from 0 to 100. I went from saying nothing to speaking up in the boardroom, and I put my foot in my mouth. I didn't know what I was talking about, right? You don't want to do that. That's going to get you a ticket to never getting invited again. You'll be benched, as they say, right? So it's a delicate thing. It's not easy to go through, but those are a few tips and tricks. And then once you see that value, connect little by little. Hey, this design adds value by doing this. It adds value by doing that. And speak up in those small forums. Maybe it's a design team critique, and you say, hey, or maybe it's how you're talking about your work. I did this in my work because it adds value where the company needs it by doing XYZ. Test yourself out bit by bit and then work your way there. There's
Nice.
so much more of that question, but that's kind of the starting point.
Okay. I like that. All right. Let's see. We've got a little more time. I'm going to pivot us to another one that I find personally fascinating, being on the older side of my career, as I sad to admit is true. It says, I missed the boat in becoming a staff level or director working for companies that lack growth opportunities. Now I'm over 40. How do I stay relevant and get over the stall?
I don't know how over 40 this person is, so I'm just gonna
Fair
I'm just
enough.
gonna assume you're somewhere in your 40s, okay? So let's assume that because that's the starting point. Um, I mean, I'm in my 40s, so I really hope I haven't missed the boat. But if I have, I always tell myself there's probably another boat coming. So don't think because you missed that opportunity that all our opportunities are gone. That would be my first thing, right? The opportunities they're gonna keep coming. Okay. If they're not coming, you're gonna make it happen. You're gonna go find it. It's like you're gonna find the next scheduled boat that's gonna come, and you're gonna say, how do I next time be ready for this and the time that it's coming? I think if you thought you were ready back then for the opportunity, it means you still have the same skill set. Those skills didn't go away. So if you're ready then and you missed the boat, you'll still be ready now because you have that arsenal of skills. So I would say, get back on it. Write a resume that is, going to land you the job at the level that you want, which means mining your skill set to reflect the skills needed at that level. I really hope that if you're in your 40s that you haven't missed the boat. Most people that want to be director level start in their late 30s, mid 40s. Okay, so just to level set you there.
Mhm.
Yes, there are the 30, the Forbes, best under 30, best under 40, most successful people. Absolutely. However, we see those magazine covers, we see that on social media. Those aren't the norm. Also, a lot of people that I coach who have had younger bosses have said they were the worst bosses they've ever had. Why? Because younger people haven't had exposure. They haven't had
Yeah.
the opportunities to learn how to manage people. And so they're managing people and they're faking it till they make it, and they have no idea what they're doing, which is another reason most leaders work their way up, right? So just things to think about. And I really hope you don't think you missed the boat. You can always try to figure out how to get on another one.
Nice, nice. All right. I know we're
We're
at
at time. Yeah.
1:30
Yeah. So
Eastern time. So maybe we can do one more if folks want to stay on. Obviously, if you have to jump, we certainly
yeah,
understand.
this
It's
is being
Friday and
recorded
whatnot.
too.
Yep.
I'm probably going to post this one publicly just because it's a big
Okay.
topic. So it'll probably be on our YouTube page.
All right. Let's
But
see. I'm
then
gonna pick.
pick a
I've
good
got here.
one.
Let's see
No
here.
pressure.
Yeah. Right. I feel like you've touched on that. Uh, Simple one. We'll end with maybe a bit of a softball. Um, what are some tactics just to combat burnout?
That's
We
a
all
hard
know
one. You
that's
said it was simple.
it was a short one, maybe not simple.
That's a really loaded question, Jeremy. We've thought about doing a cohort just on burnout,
We should do that.
which we should. There is no silver bullet answer for this one. But I always start with boundary setting. And most
Mm,
people who are burnt out, I hate to tell you this, but you probably did it to yourself a little bit because you took everything on.
yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll do this. Has anyone, does this sound familiar to anyone? Sure, I can do that too. Yep, I can do that. Yeah. Did you say no? Most people, I have to literally practice with people. Say the word with me. Say no. We can say
Mm,
no. Right. There's another book that I've used my entire career. I read it every so often, and every time I read it, I get something else out of it. It's called The Power of the Positive No. It's a yes disguised as a no. If you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another thing. Okay. And there are ways to tell people no without saying the word no, which is the most brilliant thing ever invented. So read this book because there are tactics in there for boundary setting, telling people no. That sounds like a yes. So I'll give you a great example. Have you ever gone to somebody and said, do you, or can you help me with this? Can you do this? I was told you can do this. And somebody defers to someone else. Oh, well, I can't do that, but I know, that John over there, he's really good at that. That's a no disguised as a yes. I'm helping you find the answer, but I'm not the one that's going to put in the effort to do it for you. Okay. So, great book. definitely keep it in your arsenal, because there are a lot of great tactics. And boundary setting is an art. So it starts, by learning tactics and Google it. There are tactics to boundary setting, right? Leaving work at work is one that I often practice. And a lot of times that takes some cognitive behavioral kind of things that you have to do. If you're commuting, visualization of leaving work at work, having as you drive away, each thing you had at work, leave one behind, leave it behind, leave it behind. Okay. You got a 15-minute commute, you got a 30-minute commute, you got a 45-minute commute, kind of even better because by the time you walk in that door, it's all at work. You can ask Jeremy. I had a 45-minute commute that was one way, and that was the best work-life balance I ever had because I had 45 minutes to leave work at work. So, working from home, literally change your space. This is cognitive behavioral stuff. I'm not making this up. Go take a walk, leave the space, leave your home office like mine, go for a walk, change your physical space, and then come in. That walk you take, that changing of your physical space, will help you set the boundary to transition from working to doing life. Okay. Couple of easy tactics you can do, but yeah, burnout's a whole topic in itself. So awesome,
All
guys.
right.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much. I am really looking forward to our next one as well. This was, I love this topic. I love sharing like how to become a leader, how to be a better designer, how to be a better person, how to not get burned out. All of that stuff is super, super important. We can all lead at any level. I want to leave you with that. So don't think anything we went over today, you have to be a leader to do it. Anyone can lead at any level. I really, truly believe that. And so I'll leave you with that. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys in July. So awesome.
Awesome.
Enjoy your summer from now until then.
Thanks,
Bye,
Gabby. Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. See you next time.